Hello, I'm Stephen Boylan from Eason, and I'm absolutely delighted to welcome Niall Breslin to Eason's today. His new book, Me and My Mate Jeffrey, has just been published by Shepherd's Ireland. Niall, thanks a million for coming in to talk to us about this. It is your first book. Why did you decide to write it, and kind of how did you approach it?
I had no game plan with the writing. I've never written a book, and it was difficult, I have to say. And I think the thing is, it's like writing, it's being creative in any capacity. You can't force it. So I kind of wrote when I felt like writing, rather than kind of forcing myself to write.
Yeah.
And because it's quite I suppose, a tough, at times, story to write, it was difficult. And you're kind of bringing your family to kind of go over everything and all the details to make sure they're correct. So yeah, it was a difficult thing to do, but I think for me it was very therapeutic. In the end, it kind of allows yourself when you write about, and it's not an autobiography, that's not what I wanted to do. It's more of a kind of, it's not a self-help book either. It's kind of looking at situations in the past that I could have dealt with better if I had been given the coping strategies and I had been taught how to cope, which never happened in schools. And that's something I'm trying to change. So that's hopefully the book might kind of push people towards that, the idea of getting into the education system in a much more strategic way.
And as you say, I mean, it's an incredibly honest book, and it's very raw in a lot of parts. Was there any things that you really kind of thought twice about putting into it, or did you just say everything has to go in?
I think you can't half do this type of book, and people, if you do, will see through it. It's not something you can half talk about either. I had that decision, I made that conversation with myself, and I really said, will I write a book that kind of tips on certain things, or do I not put bells and whistles on? And that's what people sometimes are doing in the mental health conversation. They're kind of saying everything will be great and be positive, and it's not that easy. And I think that's important to highlight that there's people going through it now at the moment, and they're in dark places, and they don't need to be told everything will be okay. They need to know they're not alone. So I think if I went at it and I didn't be that raw and honest, it would have came across. And I'm not a writer, and I don't pretend to be a writer. And the one thing I was told to be is never try to tell anyone else's story here. Be raw as you can. And I think what I did as well when I wrote is I just wrote. I just kept writing. I didn't think too much, and that's probably why it was quite raw, and probably why there was a lot of spelling mistakes as well. Not in the book.
At the start, there's kind of, I suppose the foundation of the book is a trip to Israel that you have at the start of the book. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, my dad went to Israel. He was in the UN. He was in the Irish Army and stationed at the UN, UNIFIL in southern Lebanon. He was there for I think a year and a half, 2 years, so he kind of wanted us to be over there for part of it. We went over, and at the time, I don't know if it was our fault, but literally at the time there was no hostilities between Lebanon and Israel for a couple of years.
Yeah.
2 weeks after we landed, it kicks off, and it kicked off in a really profound way. So I think we were always safe, but I never felt safe.
Yeah.
And I think that was the birth of I believe that I had underlying anxiety problems anyway, and my mother definitely told me as a child. I was certainly shown probably signs of it, but when we went to Israel, I just all of a sudden realised how vulnerable we became, and you start questioning at 13 or 14. You shouldn't be questioning whether you're going to, that shows how lucky we are in Ireland to live in a country where kids don't really have to think like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was an eye-opener for me.
Okay, as you mentioned, it's not a straightforward autobiography. It's not Niall Breslin, my story, it's called Me and My Mate Jeffrey. Tell us a little bit about who Jeffrey is.
Yeah, it's a funny one. I think over the years, one of my coping strategies, it was kind of a turning point with my journey to mental health. I was completely disguised for so long, and it was consuming me and really destroying everything in its way, relationships, careers, everything. I'm not using that as an excuse. I just, I wasn't functioning at times, and then so it kind of built up to the voice. I had a panic attack before I showed the voice, very profound one. I've had panic attacks all my life, but this was a kind of a catalyst to change. And I decided after that everything had to change. And one of my game plans was that I ran away from it all the time. I ran away from my mental health. I think I ran away because I didn't understand it. So I decided to humanize it, objectify it, give it a name. And if I had a name and I could objectify it, I could probably deal with it better and look at ways of almost talking to it. So I gave that name Jeffrey. It's funny, it was a name I've never been a massive fan of. I don't mean that in any negative way, and I kind of just went, Jeffrey. I said, right, that's what we're going to call you, and we're going to look at things that Jeffrey really liked, and we're going to absolutely jump in and promote them, and we're going to look at things that Jeffrey really didn't like and keep away and limit them. Yeah. And I never did that before, and things like toxic environments, things like negativity and judgmental behaviour, things like maybe abusing alcohol, abusing, negative or processed foods,
Yeah.
stuff like that. All this stuff came into the equation. But the one thing I need to point out in this entire journey, I'm not advocating any of the things I did were the things people should do.
Okay.
These are things I did personally. This
Yeah.
is my story.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm trying to do is make people feel okay about seeking that help and looking at these things and not feeling in any way that this is a weakness or it's something that you should be ashamed of. So that's important to point out with this book. Mental health and mental health illness is very complex, very subjective, and there's no point in me pretending what I do will help somebody else. It might,
Yeah.
but it's up to them to explore that.
How do you think it is in Ireland now in relation to support services? Do you think it's getting better, or do you think there's still a lot of challenges out there?
I think our charities are incredible. I think what our charities do, and they've been around long before people were talking about it, long before this was in the media, long before people, they were there when people wouldn't even mutter the word suicide or depression. So I think they're the real heroes in the mental health kind of campaigns at the moment. But the reality is, I'm a mental health campaigner and advocate, and it's very difficult for me to say to a 17, 18-year-old teenage boy, go and get help, unless I know he can get it.
Yeah.
So for me, yes, I don't think the services are up to scratch. I'd like to think that they're going to become up to scratch, and I'd like to think that there's a commitment to do that, but at the moment there's no point in me pretending they are. But this isn't a headhunt, it's not about politics. It's not about, pointing fingers. It's about asking what can be done, and at the moment people are actually coming forward, looking for help. People who never do that before, adults, men, teenagers, everyone you name it, are now willing to look for help. I just hope that our services start to, because there is services out there, and if you can get them, they're actually really, really good.
Yeah.
The fact is, some people can't get that access, and that's not okay, especially with this particular issue. If you had a broken leg, you wouldn't be asked to wait for 6 months to get it seen to. So I think as soon as we can kind of put the physical, and as soon as we can see mental health like physical health, we're getting somewhere. And I always make the analogy, look, imagine having a serious illness like cancer and being frightened to ask for help, because that's essentially what's happening to a lot of people. And some people aren't getting that help, and the really horrifying kind of sadness is that a lot of people are ultimately taking their own lives without ever seeking help, and that's not okay.
Yeah, and kind of on that theme, there's obviously a lot of people out there who would be struggling but wouldn't recognise themselves that they have a mental health issue. If they pick up this book, what's the one thing you want them to take out of it?
I think the reason they probably won't recognise it is that society doesn't really want them to recognise it, because we're being forced to be robots since we were in school. Like, it's all about what you could achieve academically in school, and then when you left school it was like, can I get a good job, and can I get a mortgage, and can I get this? We've all been it's been bred into us to be that type of people, and so much so that it's the kind of empathy and emotion that's been sucked out of people. And I think the idea of recognising it is, don't be fearful of it in any way. Like anxiety, for example, which is what I was general anxiety disorder diagnosed with, and depression, they're difficult, but they're dealable with, they're manageable. And there's other more serious issues and more serious mental health issues that are a conversation that I didn't have a right to talk about because I've never experienced them. But I do think for me at the moment, if people worrying about recognising it, there'll be certain parts of that book that you will kind of go, wow, I totally get it. Does that mean you're suffering from depression? Maybe not.
Yeah.
But the one thing I did say in the book is you won't question it.
Yeah.
And that's something that I realised very quickly, is that it's not something you have. It's all consuming. It becomes at the absolute forefront of your mind. Everything you do, everything you think about doing, that's when you know you're starting to lose the ability to function.
Yeah.
And that's when you're in that place, you need help, and help will get you to a place where you can cope with that. So I think ignoring it is not the answer, and that's what I did for 15 years, and it destroyed so much. And I think that's the one thing I got to get across, that whereas once I ran away from Jeffrey, that he became, and now I've got to know him and met him halfway, and he's become probably my closest friend. My mind has become something I'm very proud of, and I worked on my mental fitness, and now it's something that I would imagine is quite strong.
Sport and exercise has always been a key part of your life, and I know you did an Ironman recently. How did that go for you?
I did a 70.3 Ironman. My full Ironman is next year, so yeah, it was brilliant. It was a real test. I think those kind of events are a real test of how far your mind might have come, and I don't see those races, I don't see those endurance events and all the other marathons and stuff, I don't see them as a physical thing at all anymore.
Yeah.
I see them as a mental thing, and I think if you look at any endurance athletes or athletes in general, they'll tell you that their mind is really the motherboard, it's the key, and the irony of that is probably 99% of people in this country don't invest anything in their mind. They'll spend money on gym membership, on their cars, on going for a few pints at the weekend, but they do nothing for their mind, and that calls all the shots. So for me, that's one thing sport proves to me. It's the body and mind working perfectly in tandem, and that's a great thing because you realise how much they both require each other.
Yeah. Fantastic. Speaking of feeding your mind, as you know, we're all big fans of books here in Eason. Have you any recommendations that you can pass on to anybody that you've read recently?
The last book I just finished last night actually was Andre Agassi's.
Brilliant, yeah.
Which is very powerful. As raw as it comes, I suppose, and it was kind of nice to read it just before my book came out. Because I was like, God, he doesn't hold back in it, and I've always seen him as an amazing character, but I didn't realise I got under the skin, and the book was incredibly well written as well and hilarious. But it just shows you as well the stereotype you have of maybe elite athletes thinking that they're these beacon of strength and mental and physical strength, and the reality is a lot of elite athletes I know struggle. They don't know how to deal with the pressure of their sport, and because of that they start manifesting mental health issues. So it's a great book to read if you are questioning the stereotype and stigma, because here's one of the greatest tennis players of all time, greatest characters, who was going through absolute hell when he was playing tennis and actually hated the sport.
It's an incredible story.
Yeah.
Thanks very much, Niall, for coming in. Really, really appreciate it. Best of luck with everything and continued success. Me and my mate Jeffrey is now available in all Eason stores and Easons.com, and we'll see you again soon.